Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for October 23, 2021, headed back to the World Series edition. Of course, I have to start with the Houston Astros, who are headed back to the World Series after knocking out the Boston Red Sox in Game 6 of the American League Championship Series. In the world of bribery and corruption, Ericsson is accused by the Department of Justice of breaching its deferred prosecution agreement. This is a serious matter. I have worked with companies that have been in a similar situation, and it could lead to substantially higher penalties and an elongated monitorship for Ericsson. The allegations are that Ericsson has failed to provide certain documents and information related to the settlement. So Ericsson finds itself in a difficult place. Next up, and the rest of the articles come from the Wall Street Journal, a senior member of the SEC has criticized conditions placed on Credit Suisse as a part of the reprieve granted to the bank in connection with its tuna boat scandal in Mozambique. SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, who voted for the waiver, said she opposed certain conditions that came with the reprieve, including a requirement that Credit Suisse chief executive and chief compliance officer certify annually the bank's compliance. That's a pretty inane criticism, because if the top guys won't certify compliance with the settlement agreements, it really eviscerates the settlement agreement. So more criticism of enforcement by Hester Pierce, really no surprise there. Honeywell has reserved $160 million to cover an expected penalty for FCPA violations. The company, which first disclosed its probe in 2019, is being investigated by both the SEC and the DOJ. So Honeywell may be getting ready for a big FCPA settlement, and they may come fast and furious in Q4. Next up, the Theranos trial. And this week, a former scientist for Pfizer testified that he'd advised his employer against working with Theranos more than a year before the startup altered a report so that it featured Pfizer's logo and purported to validate Theranos' blood testing devices. The testimony came in the ongoing trial against Theranos, and it really demonstrates just the culpability and character of the people working at Theranos, that they would illegally appropriate a logo of a major pharmaceutical company who had rejected their claims of their blood testing device, yet would use that false information to try to defraud other investors and the general public. The testimony against Theranos has just been overwhelming. It's hard to understand what the defense is going to try to use to counter it, unless it's the battered wife or girlfriend, I guess in this case, syndrome. Whether that's going to work, who knows, but it looks like Theranos was certainly one big fraud. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.